As an occasional film photographer, I stand firm with my belief that the best and possibly only way to truly get that quintessential film look is to shoot on real, actual film. It handles light, exposure, colors, and more in a manner which digital cameras simply cannot. In addition to that, there's the tactile element. The cameras are mechanical machines. The film emulsions record their imagery in silver. No part of film photography is cheap, except for those old plastic fantastics no one really wants anymore. Film emulation and post-production may be able to get close enough to the look of film such that I can pretend at least. Dehancer emailed me about a collaboration opportunity some weeks back, and it was not something I wanted to pass up. They wanted me to make a review/tutorial video for a plugin of my choice. I chose the DaVinci Resolve plugin. For this, I'm going to compare real, actual film photos I shot on Kodak Portra 400 to video footage I shot alongside it on Panasonic S5. That just begs the question, how closely can I get digital to look like film? The first question, though, should be, how does one actually use this software plugin? Dehancer Pro has a long list of features and adjustable parameters. But my plan is to focus on the settings we'll need in order to achieve a film look without too much work. If you're using a motion picture film like those in the Kodak Vision 3 250D or 500T or 50D, you will need to do more adjustments than for using a stills photography film like Kodak Portra 400. Alright, we're here in DaVinci Resolve Studio with Dehancer Pro. I have ACES color management enabled project-wide. If you haven't yet already enabled ACES color management, you could do so via File, Project Settings, Color Management, Color Science, ACES CCT, ACES version 1.3. Make sure you set your output transform to Rec 709 for SDR delivery. For HDR delivery, you can use Rec 2020 HLG or Rec 2020 SD2084. HDR is a topic for another video. This is SDR. Right back to our test project. This video's primary focus is on Portra 400, one of the most digital looking of film stocks. But at the same time, it's a great place to start, especially when you have analog photos to compare with like I do and you're learning your way around the plugin. Now, these are the options I want to focus on for a quick film look. Film stock choice. Film compression. Film grain. Halation. Bloom. Film breadth. Everything else you could save for later. Modern Kodak Portra 400 is built on the same technology underpinning Vision 3 250D, and it claims to have the finest grain of an ISO 400 film. Way I see it, though, it's actually a 250 ISO film that's rated at 400 due to C41 processing. For film grain, I'll usually go with the 35mm or 16mm profiles. There are also options for 65mm as well as 8mm. For film grain, I'll usually go with the 35mm or 16mm profiles. Yes, there are options for 8mm and 65mm as well, but the 8mm softens the image too much for my liking. The 65 is so fine it's hardly noticeable on my screen, and it's probably likely YouTube's VP9 compression will turn it to mush by the time it gets up there. For halation, I'll try to match it up with the film grain profile I select. Example, 35mm / Super 35 with 35mm, or 16mm with 16mm. Halation is the reddish glow or haloing around brights and highlights. It comes from light that passed through the film, reflected off the camera's insides, and right back into the back of the film. There's a similar effect known as bloom. Bloom does not entail a reddish glow. It's more a diffuse effect from scattering and reflection of light before it goes through the film base. You can already replicate that kind of effect with something like a Pro Mist filter. But you might want extra bloom where you didn't plan on it initially. Sometimes you want the look of old film, and that requires film damage. It comes in different profiles for different film gauges. But I personally don't want to use this effect. Film breadth is the variation in color over time and is a subtle effect of the preset profiles here. You will need to use custom for more noticeable effect. Do bear in mind that this isn't something a LUT can replicate. It is a dynamic effect. Now there are options for gate weave and overscan as well, but those I prefer not to use. Simply because they may crop into my image too much. In vignetting, I just click this, enable it, and it's usually good to go. And you know how the image is a little darker around the periphery? That's vignetting. These settings you can get around maybe 80% of the way through. If you're not using a motion picture film like those in the Kodak Vision 3 family, then I would ignore most of the print profile options here, except for maybe linear. Because it seems to me that the Kodak 2383 or Fujifilm 3513 are best combined with Kodak Vision 3 films, or Fuji Eterna Vivid 500 or Reala 500D. One wouldn't normally want to use a still photography film profile on video, however it's easier to get a nice looking final image that way. And yeah, well, let's just pretend I managed to get a hold of a bulk roll of Portra, or I cross-processed 250D and C41 instead of ECN2, something like that. Let's now take a look at how Dehancer Pro compares to real Kodak Portra 400. My first roll of that stuff I shot was sometime in the middle of November 2021. It was a bright, cold day, and most of the leaves already dropped off the deciduous trees. I was at the Evergreen Rotary Park in Bremerton, Washington, United States of America. With a bit of tweaking of the options, here's what I got. Dead giveaways for the fake Portra 400 is, and just take a look at the extreme highlights. Real Portra 400 has way more overexposure latitude than my Panasonic has. Other than that, things can actually get fairly close, provided an image of sufficient quality. I've shot at least a few rolls of Kodak Portra 400 in my few years' time as a film photographer. This next roll, we're comparing stuff I shot about a year ago or so on the Ektar H35 on a sunny day in January in an area due west of Seattle. These are raw scans processed manually with raw therapies tools, rather than automatically with view scan and auto levels. They were, however, still scanned with Epson Perfection V700 and view scan, seeing as there aren't that many tools that could still operate this old flatbed scanner. I spent a lot of time trying to match the colors between the real film and the film emulation, but still couldn't get it. The extreme overexposure from shooting the Portra 400 during a sunny day in the Ektar H35 with its fixed 1/100 and f9.5 means multiple stops of overexposure, and that kind of overexposure can kind of break things in a less than predictable fashion. But unlike overexposing digital by that much, film still produces a usable image. Image that isn't easy to replicate in the digital realm. It isn't necessarily a nice look, but yeah, it's a look. The lens in the Ektar H35 is an acrylic meniscus lens. There's a certain softness to it as well. And what feels like such a waste of fine grain. Alright. My last batch of photos I'll be comparing are from Poulsbo, Washington. Or downtown, the Waterfront. was December 2022, nighttime, the holidays. 1/60th of a second, at f1.7. I pushed that roll of film 2 stops. In spite of the push, it is unbelievably fine-grained. What I see with the photos, either the grain modeling isn't 100% accurate, or the scanner I used introduced quite a bit of read noise. Now just look at the shadows. Shadows on my film emulation look too clean, at least when compared to the scans. I recently parted ways with the old Panasonic S5 Mark I that I had since about June of 2021. Really loved that camera. Made a lot of great memories with it. But its shortcomings and the temptation of the S5 too were starting to become too much to bear. Especially when I got it at a discount. I thought about keeping the S5, especially since it has served me well in the couple years I had it. But I know that I will end up using it way less with the S5 II in my possession. I can buy another camera later on if I really need, though. Playing back at 5 frames a second. I'm surprised it's not eating up more CPU time, but it is eating up most of the GPU time there. Just talking the film color grade. Oh my god, even that still doesn't play back in real time. Yeah, with the film emulation, we have grain, halation, bloom, breath enabled. And I'm getting about 18 frames per second of playback speed. Do note that these film grain emulation plugins consume a lot of processing power. If you want real-time playback in 4K with film grain on, you'll need something around the power of an RTX 3080 or better. I have an RTX 3080 Ti, and I'm still struggling a bit. If you're running 6K OpenGate footage like I am, it will be easy enough to max out even the RTX 3080 Ti's 12 gigabytes of VRAM. I also tried this on my 16 gigabyte M1 MacBook Air, and it didn't even play back 4K in real time at Dehancer Pro, not even close. My recommendation is to complete all your other edits before you add in the Dehancer Pro node. As for actually using Dehancer Pro, you'll want to take some time to familiarize yourself with its interface. It's a lot more involved than simply using an Instagram filter or a TikTok effect. And if you want to process stills, you can use Adobe DNG converter to convert your camera RAWs to DNG files, and then you can import those DNG files into DaVinci Resolve. Just beware that the free version of Resolve doesn't do anything higher than 3840 by 2160 for timeline resolutions. But I believe it could take anything in terms of input resolutions. You can give it 8K for all I know. But it just means you won't be able to export anything higher than 3840 by 2160. For most, that is okay. Dehancer Pro comes remarkably close to replicating the look of film considering footage of decent enough quality. But on the other hand, it's not entirely accurate. I consider it based on the amount of grain in the shadows versus highlights, as well as the fact that not all film stocks have the same grain characteristics at a given film speed. It could improve on the selection of grain profiles. As good as film emulation has gotten, it still cannot replicate the experience of and look of film 100%. Real negative film still has way more overexposure latitude than nearly every digital imaging sensor ever made. Well, maybe except for ARRI's Alev 4. I don't have ARRI Alexa money though. Best I could do are the Panasonic Lumix S cameras like the S5 I no longer have, and the S5 II that I'm currently using. On a positive note, Dehancer Pro is fully compatible with project-wide ACES color management workflow that I use. And if you don't like ACES, it's also compatible with DaVinci Wide Gamut. If you don't use color management project-wide, there's also camera profiles, just like in the main competing film emulation plugin. The main competing plugin, however, is not compatible with ACES or DaVinci Wide Gamut, and it also includes fewer film stocks than Dehancer. Now, if you aren't using DaVinci Resolve, Dehancer Pro is also available for Final Cut Pro, as well as Adobe Premiere Pro and After Effects. There's even a version specifically for stills in Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One, and Affinity Photo. There are free trials available via their website, and if you ultimately decide to buy, you can get 10% off, help my channel by using my promo code. If this isn't for you, that's okay too. You can help with the like button and subscribe, for I will take a deeper dive into various film stocks and different cameras later on.